And those are more or less represented, well, exactly represented actually by the pie chart in front of you. So we asked them which activities they consume and how important those are. And then, of course, we go a step forward. We ask them which firms they consume to get these services and how valuable each of these firms are. And that is basically the methodology that we used in the Analyst Value Survey, and that's where we get the Analyst Firm Awards from. Just a point about methodology, that we segment the participants into different market sectors. What we find is that there are analysts who are differently influential in different parts of the technology market. So we are looking at valid responses. So that means that we take out some responses that aren't valid. I'll say something about that in a little moment. We ask people which topics, which coverage areas they are consuming analyst insight about. And then we weight that to reflect the different services that they're using. So we put more weight on services that are more influential, of course, less weight on services which are less influential. You can read more about the method on the Analyst Value website, analystvaluesurvey.com/methodology, if you particularly want to know about the methodology. So as I just mentioned, there are some exclusions. So we get some duplicate responses. Some people take the survey as soon as it opens, and then they forget about it, and then they take it at the end. We also get some low quality responses when people are just speeding through the survey. So to get access to the Analyst Value Survey webinar that drills into the results, you need to have taken the survey. There are some people who take the survey but don't really, don't give real responses. We exclude those, of course. Also, there are some firms that are excluded. So we're excluding the big accounting companies. In our opinion, they are not analyst firms because they don't have an independent research profile, though it's important to understand how influential those firms are. And also, our friends at Constellation Research asked to be excluded. So we were delighted to respect their request. So to give a top-level overview of how the different analyst firms are standing, basically there are three main groups of analyst firms, and then of course the very, very large fourth group of firms that didn't make it. So firstly, we have the big full-service analyst firms, which are active in almost all of the coverage areas that we are asking about in the survey. Then there's a second group of firms which are either less valuable or they are producing research on fewer areas, but many. And then there's a third group of organizations which are often specialists in just one area, maybe two, but often they are niche providers. And this point of niche influence, I think, is very interesting for us, and we drill into that a little bit more. But overall, it's worth saying that for us, value is really driven by use. In a certain sense. Hang on, somebody's just asked if you don't see the slides, can I suggest that you refresh your screen? By the way, so I know that some people do have that issue. Certainly, I'm still broadcasting slides. From our point of view, research is strongly correlated. The value of research is strongly correlated with use. The more people who use you, the more people can take value from you. And our methodology, in a certain sense, is based on looking at all of the value and seeing how that firm's share of value is composed in the different categories that we are using. So in the survey that we have, we're going to be talking about the most valuable firms, but I just want to mention one firm, ISG, that didn't make it. Now, ISG is winning a kind of runner-up prize this year. It was quite highly rated, but just didn't really get up into any of our top 10s. Out of all of the analyst firms, ISG is the most valuable firm that didn't win any of our top 10 awards. So I just want to mention them. There are two differences in the way that we're segmenting the awards this year. In the past, people may know that we've done like top fives and second fives, But what we're doing this year is providing the platinum list and the gold list. So the platinum firms are the firms that are creating most of the value. So a majority of the value that's being consumed by participants who took the Analyst Value Survey, a majority of that is coming from the platinum firms. That's typically 5 or 6 firms that are leading in the market. And then there's a group underneath them, the gold firms. They're the next most valuable firms. And added together, the platinum firms and the gold firms are producing 2/3 of all of the analyst value being created for the participants who are using analyst firms inside that market sector. There's a second difference this year, which is the notion of hidden champions. So we can't claim the credit for this. Hidden champions is something that has been going for around 20 years in scholarly circles. Hidden champions are firms that use specialization to be able to take advantage in a narrow market segment. And what interested us was to see whether there are highly valued firms that are being used by a group of participants in some of these areas that we're using for the awards. And so what we're doing this year is putting alongside the traditional method a alternative statistical method, which we're calling hidden champions. And what that hidden champions approach does is puts more weight on the intensive respondents. So these are people who are using analyst research a lot, but in a small number of areas. And we've been putting a little bit less weight on the extensive respondents, people who are using research across a wide range of coverage areas. And that is uncovering to us a layer of analyst firms that are clearly generating a lot of value in particular subcategories for the awards, but who were not able to register with our traditional analysis. I'm going to move now to the first and biggest category, the Global Analyst Firm Awards. And I think while I might do that, I may even take a sip from a glass of water. Lovely. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions, then please type those into the question bar. If you're having any trouble viewing any of the slides or hearing us, there will be a replay of the webinar, which will be available at the same URL a little while after the end of this webinar. So in the global category, what we are including is everything. So we're including all of the data from the valid participants, regardless of the categories that they are in. So in that sense, that's a different definition from last year when we had 2 geographical categories. We had a category for the Americas and then a rest of the world category, which we called global. So that's not what we're doing this year, but we are including all of the data in the global category. These are the winners, and you'll see that there are 2 names which are in green. So the platinum winners, they are the ones on the left-hand side. These are the firms that have produced most of the value. I must admit, you'll see a lot of consistency between the different categories this year, and frankly, between this year and last year in the results. But 451 has edged up a little bit. Impressive to see it generating more value than Ovum this year. And Everest, again, a firm that was certainly on the radar last year, has pushed up and is the most valuable of the firms in the gold category. Quite an accomplishment for them. So as a point of comparison with last year, the top 6 firms were all in the top 7 last year, and the firms that have fallen most notably are ISG and Analysis Mason, both of which have fallen out. So I've put a URL in there if you want to compare to the previous year's awards. I've done that in each of the categories later on. So now that the methodology is out of the way and all of this vocabulary, we can go a little bit more quickly. I'm going to step through the next 2 categories a little bit more briskly, and then we will see if we have time for questions. So here you can see in the cybersecurity category, it's composed of various coverage areas. So people who use the Architect CRM solution for analyst relations will know what a coverage area is. We've gone through a process of taking a list of thousands of coverage areas, building them into a hierarchy, and identifying the 50 most significant top-level categories. And then in the survey, there's a menu of those, and participants in the survey pick from these. And the category elements shown here are the things that wrapped together form our cybersecurity awards territory. These are the firms that have performed most strongly in the cybersecurity area. So you'll see here that these are generalist analyst firms. Yeah, that there's no 5-person analyst firm punching above its weight, getting into the top 10. And again, that's because of our methodology and the way that our methodology is adding up all of the value being created for people who are saying that they are using research in that area. A lot of stability this year, especially in the top tier. Frost and Sullivan's performance and reputation is a little bit uneven from segment to segment, but certainly in cybersecurity, they seem to be taken seriously. As a comparison with next year, 5 out of the 6 platinum firms were in the 2017 awards, the last time we did the security award, and some notable exceptions. One is CXP Group, the organization which is now called Technology, and HFS Research. So now I come to this hidden champions analysis. You'll see I've got this big salmon-colored bar across the screen here, just to draw attention to this hidden champions approach. And just as a reminder, what we're looking for here are firms that are punching above their weight with the people who are most intensively using research on that topic. So we're giving more emphasis to people who use cybersecurity more than anything else, and we're putting less weight on participants who are using cybersecurity across a wider level. And you'll see that I've marked out 3 firms in bold. So on each of these charts, I've put in bold the organizations which get into the top 10 using this hidden champions method, but which did not make it into the top tier. Informa Tech, HFS Research, and Everest. These are our 3 hidden champions, the organizations that are being used more intensively. The other thing that I should point out is the option here listed at number 6, other write-in. So as people will know who've taken the survey, you can pick out of a list of 60 or so of the biggest firms. We aim to include every firm with more than 10 full-time analysts. But there's also a write-in option, just like in an American election. And so you can see that number 6 option, these firms are performing very well, unsurprisingly for niche participants that are being highly valued. AI and analytics has grown massively as an area of use. In fact, almost a quarter of the respondents said that they were consuming research on AI and analytics. That is a really, really major development. It's composed of these coverage areas: AI, analytics, business intelligence, data analytics. The last 3 of these are basically euphemisms for each other, just in more modern language. And if we look at the winners, we'll see again 451 performing better this year than last year, and HFS Research, which was one of the top performers the last time we ran this, has slipped. You can't complain about that position though, being top of the gold rank. Definitely not a terrible position to be in, but that's where they are. Moving on to the hidden champions analysis, some interesting firms coming out there. Arc Advisory, an organization which is especially gaining traction in like complex inter-organizational settings. It does very well on like supply chain, Internet of Things kind of stuff, as we'll see later on. G2, the organization previously known as G2 Crowd, and Ventana. As a point of comparison with last year, with the previous award, the last time we ran the Analytics Award, actually very similar to the previous award. We're going to see some similar trends across many of these awards. 451 gaining traction, coming into the top 10. Maybe worth mentioning for people who don't know, 451, of course, was recently purchased by S&P, the people who run the Standard & Poor's indices, and that's good news for them. And then, sadly, again, for fans of European boutiques, CXP Group has dropped out of the top group. Largely, that reflects the fact that BARC, the Business Advisory Research Centre, which was one of the founder members of the CXP Group, has left. So that is a German boutique, about 35 people or so, last time I looked, that is specialized in business intelligence. I'm going to move on now to enterprise technology. This is definitely the biggest of our categories. And it's the most complex as well, because there are so many of these segments inside the coverage areas. So, of course, for people who get the full report for the Analyst Value Survey, it's possible to drill down on each of these. But actually, when we looked at which coverages were being co-selected, we found that many of the people who selected a few of these selected other categories inside the enterprise tech space. And there is very little change in the top tier here. Everest Group rising up amongst the gold firms. And in fact, the 6 platinum firms were all inside the 7 leading firms last year. As I mentioned, the big difference, especially with European users, is technology. So that really reflects a number of changes, partly the participants, the categories that are being used to build the enterprise space. But I do suspect that must also reflect what is happening for CXP. I think its share of voice is receding. The other firm that has fallen out, Enterprise Management Associates, just fell out of that top group. But we'll see in the Hidden Champions analysis that actually it performs very strongly. So here's that Hidden Champions list for enterprise technology. Our friends at ARC Advisory are there. 451. Punching above their weight. Okay, so this means fewer, maybe not a huge number of users, but those who are using it very deeply. And then Enterprise Management Associates. Just going to pause here just to draw attention again to the chat and the questions panel. We may not be able to deal with all the questions or comments today, but anything we can't deal with today, we will come back to in a blog post tomorrow. Moving on to financial technology, really growing area for many of the analyst firms. We're looking at a wide range of technology areas here, and of course, many of these are co-selected with other areas. Insurance, for example, is definitely a financial service, but there'll be a lot of co-selection of topics inside there. When we look at the firms that are being used for financial technology, it actually gets kind of interesting. The top tier, very consistent there. We're seeing these full service analyst firms which are active on a wide number of levels, doing well. HFS, obviously a firm that's got more analysts than it used to have. It's got a broader purview than it used to have, but its freemium model, I think HFS is still the king of freemium, of extending its reach with freemium research, is performing very well there. And then among the gold firms, interesting to see Nelson Hall punching above its weight there. And partly I think that is because Nelson Hall is doing a really interesting job of being able to spotlight some of the fintech players in the European market that might not quite get onto the radar. Then Serious Decisions, which of course is part of Forrester now, performs very well. I think that shows the big challenge that many financial technology firms have in helping their institutions to onboard customers, to market financial services products. You know, the vast majority of people who show an interest, who start the purchasing journey for a financial product, most of them will abandon that along the route. And I think Serious Decisions is really helping people a lot there. And Celent, of course, alongside IT, Juniper, is an outstanding boutique that is focused overwhelmingly on financial technologies. So comparing with previous surveys, people who've seen the full survey report will know that we are able to segment the report by people who are in banking and insurance. And the firms there are the most used firms in the 2017 survey by participants in financial services are actually exactly the same as the 9 firms that have created the most value in the financial technology space. So a lot of stability in our base there. When we look at the Hidden Champions research, 2 really interesting things coming out there. One is Aragon research, really punching above its weight there. I mean, Aragon is definitely growing fast. It's able to get a big audience, but really punching above its weight there. And Kuppinga-Cole is a European firm that's especially strong in identity and access and management, security-based use cases, and of course financial technology is absolutely central for them. I know for many of my customers that Kuppinga-Cole is a top priority for them, especially looking at technologies to help with verification, validation, identification, and so on. Let's move on to Internet of Things, IoT. Again, a high growth category, but luckily for us, one of the simpler ones. So here we're looking at Internet of Things, machine to machine, smart home, smart city. I suppose would also be included in that as we build the hierarchy. The platinum tier, fairly familiar names. Here for Internet of Things, IHS Markit, of course, which is very strong in a whole series of technology communication type scenarios, is performing there quite well. And we're seeing some firms which have got a particular interest in IoT and machine to machine scenarios in the gold group. But a lot of stability there. So 5 of the 6 platinum firms were in our 2017 IoT award. HFS Research fell out of that, and I think that reflects the maturity of IoT actually, and the growth of more specialized coverage in IoT, and the way that the IoT is now becoming, a really mature business technology area, as well as a kind of business case. Where we might be looking to help organizations to set a foundation for working out their future direction. But if we look at the hidden champions for IoT, we see ISG punching above its weight. Of course, that is definitely an organization which is really complex. It has a huge impact on advising clients on their purchasing options, and of course on helping suppliers to be able to generate leads. But it's also an organization that is generating some research. Then we see GSMA Intelligence, the research wing of the GSM Association. Obviously, IoT is an absolutely central question for telecommunication service providers. Telcos are the backplate for the development of many IoT businesses, and of course many major enterprises are becoming telcos themselves, are getting licenses to become communications operators. And then we see Nelson Hall, again, an organization that has been traditionally strong on the services space. Moving ahead to marketing and advertising. So this is a little bit of a mixed bag, but obviously, especially on the supply side, organizations are increasingly using technologies to be able to understand how to go to market, how to be able to identify personas, how to be able to, use technology to drive the pipeline. And the leading firms here, again, in a way, one of the surprises is that Serious Decisions doesn't appear there. But we do see Forrester Research coming in at second place, so overtaking IDC, who were in second place last year. Very familiar group of platinum firms, actually quite a familiar group of gold firms. Everest punching above its weight a little bit there on in that basket of marketing services. A lot of stability from last year. Business Intelligence Insider, the organization that used to be called BI Insider, but is the analyst wing of Business Insider, has fallen out of that top tier. And then when we look at the hidden champions, some really intriguing firms here: ABI Research, Cupping & Cole, and Deloitte. So I mentioned earlier on that the big accounting firms, we excluded them from the Analyst Firm Awards, but it is really interesting to see how Deloitte, as an organization, which is now one of the world's biggest digital marketing agencies, has got that huge research engine pumping out content, much of it being used as content marketing for thought leadership and lead generation, is clearly allowing Deloitte to punch above its weight there. Moving on to media technology, this is the kind of technology that's used by telecommunications companies, by those born in the cloud media giants like Facebook and Google, the over-the-top technologies as well. We've got quite a wide range of firms there, but almost all of them are being used to generate additional revenue flows through internet technologies. And the interesting thing here that this is, I think, one of the only categories, one of the few categories where we've got just 5 performers in the platinum tier. So just these 5 firms are producing most of the value, and they're actually quite a long tail here. So Technology Business Research pumping above its weight there. Frost & Sullivan slipping a little bit. Aragon getting into gold mark, but actually quite a long tail there. I think IHS Market also kind of performed fairly well. The business that used to be Screen Digest is in there. Now, this is the first time we've run this category, but when we did the same slice using data from a couple of years ago, what we found was that actually the leading firms were exactly the same, with the exception of Frost & Sullivan, which was one of the top placed firms last year, but then had not done so well this year. Going to our hidden champions analysis to spotlight the firms that have stood out on the media tech side. We have Juniper Research and we have Deloitte. Getting close to the end now. This is our final category. Woo! Telecoms and Networking. I think this is the longest established, or one of the longest established categories in the Analyst Firm Awards. I certainly think we did this in the very first award, and a market that is increasingly complex as telecommunications companies try to develop use cases for 5G and try to identify many of the obstacles that they have in being able to map complex networks, which are often not of their own ownership. It's a very different situation for analyst firms working with telcos now, because telcos used to be focused on their own market and on internet rates, and now you have software-defined networks which are incredibly complex. So when we look at the analyst firms there, actually many of these are organizations which are either very strong on the telco side or have got very strong functional relationships with telcos, like Forrester in helping telcos to improve digital experience and customer experience. 451 Research, of course, bought Yankee Group, which was for a very long time one of the leading analyst firms alongside Ovum that was focused in telecommunications and networking. And then the same can be said also in the gold column, Global Data and Informa Tech, and in fact Analysis Mason as well, have all acquired organizations which were strong telecommunications and networking boutiques. And then we have Frost & Sullivan slipping in the ranking, but still doing okay, getting into the top 10 firms there. So our balance sheet of that, a lot of stability. ISG, which previous years had performed well on topics like network transformations, especially in helping telcos to see how they could develop kind of service level agreements and requests for proposals to help their organizations to mobilize for 4G, to transform for 5G. I think we're finding now it's firms with more technical skills are being used by telcos. Again, more of a backstory there on previous awards on influencerrelations.com. And then when we turn over to the Hidden Champions research, the two really different firms coming out here. G2, the people who used to be G2 crowd. What makes G2 interesting is the fact that so much of its research is freely available. And you can imagine that, especially in telcos, there are so many people in telcos now who are involved in purchasing decisions who didn't used to be, but who don't have research to subscription information from these platinum firms that we were talking about. So I think the freemium aspect of G2 is really giving telcos and telco companies a lot of value, not just in developing their own technology strategy, but for product managers who are looking to better understand use cases and customer pain points. And then Deloro, well, this is very different. Deloro is a long-time telco analyst, overwhelmingly focused on advising the supply side of the industry. You know, they are one of the most I was going to say addicted, but that's not quite a positive enough work. You know, they're a provider of irreplaceably unique insights for many participants in the industry. So I think we're going to pause here for any questions and comments that have come in, and then I'm going to glurp. That's not even a word, is it? Gulp down some water. So please, if you take the opportunity, just type in any questions or any comments that you have onto the questions panel. Just to pick up on ISG, I think I covered this earlier on. Actually, ISG's got quite a complex business model, so it is absolutely working on deal consulting and on the analyst business. And I think I've got my suspicions about that, but actually I think our data don't really point to the particular instances. Then we had a really interesting question about the hidden champions. Yeah, so what is it that's making these hidden champion firms stand out against some of the larger firms? And I think in a way, I could almost flip that around and say, why are these hidden champion firms not making much more of an impact? What defines the hidden champion firms is that they're being used very deeply by small numbers of users, and they are quite different from each other. I must say, they are really quite different from each other. But what a lot of them have in common is that they are not resourcing their sales and marketing function very well. And because of that, they're producing very, very high research, very high quality research, really valuable research, but it's just not able to be enjoyed by a wide enough audience. So I think what makes those firms, so in a certain sense, these firms don't stand out against larger firms, except that their insight is being used by fewer people. And that is really a function of their scale and of their ability to mobilize their sales teams and of their frail ability to take full advantage of freemium techniques to increase their readership. So to be honest, I think it's not really an advantage that they are hidden, but it does show that these organizations are punching above their weight with the quality of their content. It's quite commanding and is being really appreciated by their users. Okay, any other questions or comments? Just while we're waiting for any questions or comments, I just want to draw attention to a couple of short links. So if you want to have a little bit more perspective on the Analyst Value Survey, of course, you can go to analystvaluesurvey.com and take a look there, or you can see this charming film starring Teea and I. And if you want to get a much deeper drill down into the Analyst Value Survey Awards, there's another link which will let you see some of the early findings from the Analyst Value Survey at a webinar that we did with our friends at AR Insights. There's a question about Enterprise Management Group. You mean it's Enterprise Management Associates? What is my opinion about Enterprise Management Associates? Well, it's a boutique firm. It certainly offers a lot of good research around technology ops, IT ops, cloud, DevOps. Really, really strong firm. If I was in the market to buy an analyst firm, I'd buy it. I think they are one of these, a classic example, actually, of the hidden champion firms, which are producing deep insight, but are just not putting enough resource either into mobilizing, activating a freemium audience, or able to produce a large enough sales force to really increase the value that they are generating. For people who want to come back and look at these slides again, so because the slides themselves maybe don't make much sense outside of context, there are two ways that you can get these, you can consume this information in the future. One is come back to this URL and there'll be a recording here and you'll be able to see those slides again. The other option for people who subscribe to Analyst Equity, the CC Group Analyst Relations newsletter, you can download a PDF version, slightly different version of this deck, largely the same from the CC Group blog. And of course, there are many firms which could be here, but let's just remember that what we're doing here is basically looking at how many people are using that firm and then how valuable are they. So if there are organizations which are really valuable but just don't have a big enough user base, then they're not going to get into the top 10 of these rankings. The other thing that's worth saying is, of course, that there's a huge amount of data in the study which can be more deeply segmented. So we are able to segment the research into many vertical markets, and there are around 50 different coverage areas. So there are, many more things that we could say with a more focused analysis into the full results from the Analyst Value Survey, but those are not broken out as categories for the Analyst Firm awards this year. Of course, in some, in some segments, like if you think Internet of Things, for example, that's mainly got industrial and retail applications. So the Internet of Things ranking might be very similar to a manufacturing approach. You think of something like insurance, which I mentioned earlier on, that isn't explicitly one of the technologies that we're able to segment on, but clearly it's a financial services technology. If you look at the financial technology results there, then you could drill into that. Actually, insurance is one of the vertical markets that we segment the study on, rather than a coverage area. So again, if people need custom analyses, then the full data from the Analyst Value Survey has a huge amount of insight that we can't easily duplicate. Okay, I'm going to pause for a little bit longer and take another sip of water, just in case there are any other questions that are coming in. Yep. Informatech. Have I heard about how Informatech is going to deal with IHS Markit technology and Ovum? And well, I think that's. I mean, that is another conversation, and I think that's outside of the scope of the Analyst Firm Awards. I think what we know now is that obviously that they are still separate firms in the market, even though they are moving in together. And well, people will know I used to work for Ovum. I've got pretty close relationships with people there. I don't want to preempt any of the changes that will be unfolding there. The other thing that's worth saying is, in these studies, we ask people if they've used IHS Markit. I think that many people who use IHS Markit do not have a very good idea of whether they've been using IHS Markit or IHS technology. That's especially complex because many of the units that you would have thought would have been sold with IHS technology were not, so especially in the financial technology space. And we weighed up whether or not to try to offer IHS Markit and IHS Markit technology as separate options in the survey, but really I don't think that would have worked very closely. There's a question about Ventana. I think Ventana did make it into one of the sections, but again, I think that's a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar. You know, that Ventana didn't make it high enough. It's clearly delivering a lot of value to its users. It also, of course, has a really notable awards program, and I think that there is. I don't think you should take awards programs too seriously. Of course, there are some analyst firms which have got very different business models. One of the things that we ask about in the survey is whether analyst firms are independent from their commercial relationships. And actually, users have got a very good idea about I've got a really good idea about which of these organisations are more or less independent, which of them are more or less pay to play. But I must admit, we're not really in the business of condemning organisations as being pay to play. You know, it will be really hard to draw a line there because there are very few analyst firms that won't, on principle, take income from the supply side of the industry. But what we do see is that organisations which are producing machine-generated research and are producing, you know, like purely quantitative kind of market sizing research. So, you know, the kind of organizations that have been set up by many of the people who previously worked at Markets and Markets, for example, we see that these organizations do not really have a strong traction in the user base that we're surveying. In terms of the analyst firms, yeah, I mean, we do communicate to the analyst firms that win awards that they win awards. With some analyst firms, it's really straightforward. You know, so last year, for example, we were able to host the dinner where we had, I think, 14 out of the 16 firms that won awards last year came along and collected their awards from us. So that was really lovely. trying to think who it was, ISG. They asked us to post the award, and Gartner didn't formally respond to us, but certainly many of the people at Gartner, shared the news about them winning their award. But I must admit, actually, we did pretty well. I'd say, actually, we got a really good conversations with many of the analyst firms. They appreciate this. What is difficult, of course, is analyst firms are complex organizations. So in the same way that many firms that have won a Cool Vendor Award from Gartner have no idea that they've won the Cool Vendor Award, many people are not aware. But absolutely, what we are really confounded by is how to deal with these big accounting firms like Deloitte, Ernst & Young, KPMG. They are increasingly seen as analyst firms. They're definitely producing a lot of research, but the growth of these organizations and their extension, their service extension, is really profound. If you think of Deloitte, I used to work at Deloitte, so it's an organization I know well. I think it's quite imaginable that could be the biggest marketing services firm in the world when you exclude advertising spend. It really could be bigger than many of the biggest advertising agencies. Okay, so I think we're coming on for the end of our hour together. Let me just repeat that a replay will be available here. If you really need the PDF, then go to the CC Group blog. There's a blog post at blog.ccgrouppr.com. There's a blog there. I think the third most recent blog by me is on the Analyst Firm Awards. Go into that blog post. You can click on the big red button and download a PDF with most of these slides, not all of them. And for more information, check out our little movie, look at analystvaluesurvey.com. Obviously, I should also be a little bit generous to our host at the University of Edinburgh. You can buy the full report from the university. If you've got some money, end of the year, and you want to get it out of the way, you can buy the Analyst Value Survey report from analystvaluesurvey.com. Good. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up now. I'll thank our colleague Teea Palo, who's the co-director of the observatory, very generously allowed me to monopolize the talk time here. And I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions or comments in the future. I'll just pop up Teea's email address. She does all the heavy lifting on the survey, so feel free to send us an email if there are any follow-up questions that you didn't want to share with the world in today's webinar. Okay, thank you so much. We'll end the webinar now, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.